Hey guys, this is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com. We're back this week with another live recruiting show. As always, if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, make sure to subscribe now. We're offering a special promotion, $10 until next football season. That gets you premium insider information on recruiting. So, what you get on the show is just a taste of things. You can get all access premium insider information at the Wolverine.com, as well as insider information on the football team, basketball recruiting. And you get to be part of a great message board community over at the Fort Message Board. So subscribe to the Wolverine.com right now, just $10 until next football season. I believe that is until August 31st of 2023 for just $10. That is less than two loads of laundry here at my apartment complex. So pretty cheap. Anyway, let's dive into Michigan recruiting. Obviously, guys, get your questions in. We are going for 30 minutes tonight. I do have a Zoom meeting after this live show that I need to get to. So we are going a flat 30 minutes tonight. So if you want your questions answered for sure, get them in early. And as always, yes, go blue, Anthony Kearney. Get them in early, or hop in with a super chat. Your super chat dollars go straight to my travel budget and not to the big corporate overlord. So that allows me to hit the road, see prospects on a weekly basis as I normally do. So hopefully, more people will funnel in here and we can get the questions rolling. In the meantime, actually, we got our first question coming in from Jesse Areola. How are we looking with the safety, Zaquan Patterson, and wide receivers, Carmelo English and Jeremiah McClellan? Um, so I think there's a mix of 23 and 24 guys here. So the 2023 prospect is Carmelo English. So when we're talking about 2023, obviously we're talking about this cycle. Carmelo English, four-star wide receiver out of Alabama, former Auburn commit, did make an unofficial visit to Michigan this fall for the game against Penn State. Had already used his official visit on Michigan in the summer before he decided to stay closer to home and commit to Auburn. Obviously, Auburn had a lot going on with its coaching staff. Obviously, they're in now contention to get a new coach. So, yeah, they had a big shakeup. English opened things up. Michigan is definitely an appealing option. I actually think Michigan may have the slight lead for English right now. And as you can see across the, he is a four-star. In fact, ESPN has him way high as a top 100 prospect. Rivals has him as a top 150 prospect. So I really like English. I actually had a chance to see him early on in his high school career. In fact, he was a kid that I wrote that Michigan should offer way back when he was going into his junior campaign. He played with Alabama Elite 7-on-7 team Gas Crew. And I saw him, randomly at a 7-on-7 tournament and he caught my attention. So I've always been a big fan of Carmelo English since he was a younger kid. He's obviously risen up as one of the top wide receivers nationally, and he is the priority on Michigan's recruiting board. If you remember, Michigan was supposed to host Jaron Hamilton for an official visit for the game against Michigan State. That did not happen. English is the guy that Michigan wants. Now, can the Wolverines close? It's definitely realistic. I do think there's still so English, I think, is still hesitant when it comes to potentially leaving the South. And that's why, a school like Kentucky is a very appealing option to English. They hosted him for a visit as well. Some other SEC schools are starting to get involved in that recruitment. So that's definitely something that I am monitoring closely. Michigan will have to overcome distance. English does like, the environment and the vibe in Ann Arbor. He's built up a close relationship with position coach Ron Bellamy. So there is a lot to like about where Michigan sits in this recruitment. But again, I think they have to convince him to get over the distance factor. Obviously, Michigan has won recruiting battle in Alabama recently. They pulled Deuce Spurlock out of there last cycle, so it's definitely a possibility. In terms of the other players, Zaquan Patterson and Jeremiah McClellan, both 2024 prospects. So we'll hit on them quickly as the questions are starting to ramp up. Zaquan Patterson is one of the top safety prospects in the country out of the state of Florida. He came in for an unofficial visit last month, and Michigan made a big impression on him. Steve Klinkscale is recruiting extremely hard in the state of Florida and has taken. Oh, if you guys don't know, Steve Klinkscale is now the area recruiter in South Florida. He actually stopped by and saw Zaquan during the offseason. Again, he visited this fall. So, yeah, I think Michigan's right up there. On three has him pretty low at the number 259 overall prospect nationally, but everybody else has him top 100. I think Michigan and Miami are definitely some early leaders in his recruitment. So I think Klink has done a tremendous job of getting in this recruitment early on, building relationships around South Florida and with those close to Patterson. So you're seeing a lot of offers go out to defensive backs in Florida. You're seeing a lot of offers in general go out in Florida. Now, Michigan has historically recruited Florida well, but I think you're seeing even more of an effort, particularly down in South Florida around the Miami area, thanks to Klinkscale, who again has taken over as the area recruiter there. Jeremiah McClellan on 300 wide receiver out of St. Louis. I actually just had a visit recap with him on the Wolverine today. Had a great time on campus for the game against Michigan State. That was his second visit. 2024 is loaded with wide receiver targets. I mean, you obviously have the more elite guys like Ryan Wingo. You have guys that are trending in the right direction like Amarion Stewart and Channing Goodwin and Jordan Shipp. I think Jeremiah McClellan's a guy that needs to be talked about a lot more. He's extremely talented. He's rated as a top 300 guy by all four major recruiting services. He actually played 7-on-7 on the club circuit with Amarion Stewart, which could definitely help if the Wolverines are able to close with Stewart out of Chicagoland. But McClellan, again, a great prospect in his own right. He had a great time on campus. I think Michigan's right up there with some schools like Notre Dame and Arkansas and Missouri, Oregon, Texas A&M. So a pretty big list for McClellan. I think he's taking his time looking at all options, but Michigan and Bellamy doing a great job there. I see we have questions about transfers, guys. The team writers handle transfers. I do not even go into the portal sphere. So sorry for anybody asking about transfers. John Stacy is next week's visitors list big. So if you're talking about this week for the game against Nebraska, it's probably going to be a little light. Not a ton of guys that we've heard that are coming in. But, Enoetta will be back on campus. I reported that last night, which will be big, considering that he did make a visit to TCU. It's obviously imperative that Michigan keeps him locked in. But, we'll see what other visitors are added to the list. Illinois should have some more guys for sure. Jair Hill's coming in, one of the top remaining targets on the board. I think you'll see some of the newer offers make official visits. Yeah, I feel like Cameron Calhoun could be a guy that pops up, or Jamel Howard. I think the newer offers are kind of getting penciled in for official either for that Illinois game or for December. There is going to be some December official visits as well. I also reported last night that Nathan Efobi on 300 offensive linemen would be making an official visit in December. So, I do think Illinois will be more loaded than Nebraska, but, Michigan got so many top end guys on campus for the game against Michigan State. And our producer Maddie's pulled up the Nathan Efobi profile, which is always funny to look at because you look at on three and they have him as a top 150 prospect nationally, and then across the board he's a 3-star. So with Nathan Efobi, just to bounce off of this this question, Nathan Efobi, and give you guys just a general update. And so I again reported this first over at the Wolverine.com. He is making an official visit in December. I do think a decision will come at some point in the near future. Michigan, I think, is still trending in the right direction. I have a on three prediction in for the Wolverines to land a phobia. I think Miami is the other school to watch out, but I'm not overly concerned with the Hurricanes. A lot of confidence with Michigan. So to pose a question that we get often in the chat, who will be Michigan's next 2023 commit? I think Nathan Efobi is definitely a strong option there. Let's go to our guy, Hugh Jepenis. What is going on with Dante Moore? Is he opening his recruitment back up? Um, Look, I think there's a lot of rumors in regards to the Oregon staff and how long they'll actually be in Eugene. But, I haven't followed Dante as closely as I obviously used to just because he's no longer really a Michigan target. But in regards to Michigan, I don't think there's anything there. I think Michigan is all in on Jaden Davis as their guy, regardless of class at the quarterback position. So I don't think there's anything with Michigan and Dante. In terms of Michigan State, obviously, Michigan State has played NIL as much as possible this recruiting cycle. It worked early. They got some early lands, and then they've had a series of decommitments as of late. Is it possible Dante ends up at Michigan State? I mean, I wouldn't completely rule it out because I'm sure Michigan State's trying to put together the greatest NIL deal of all time. But I know he's built really good connections with Oregon staff. I know he really likes the opportunities out there as well. So right now, I haven't followed it as closely, but I think it would be a little surprising if he ended up at Michigan State, unless again they put together some crazy NIL deal to lure him away and lock him in, kind of like Tennessee did with 5-star quarterback Nico Amaleva, which I'm sure I mispronounced that. But what Tennessee did with Nico, I would assume it would take something as big or even bigger for Michigan State to get Dante. So who knows? I mean, recruiting has obviously changed, but I know Dante built personal relationships with the Oregon staff, and I'm not sure he necessarily did with the Michigan staff, at least from covering the Dante recruitment early on when he was still a Michigan target. But in terms of Michigan, I don't think Michigan's going to revisit Dante. I don't think Dante's going to revisit Michigan. I think both parties have kind of moved on there. Um, Aaron Brown asks, who do you think we can flip for the 2023 class? Well, there are a handful of options. A new offer went out this week to Darius Taylor, in-state running back, 3-star prospect out of Walled Lake Western. He is currently committed to Minnesota. So that's definitely a prospect that Michigan can flip. They got him on campus for the game against Michigan State. Like, I know that Michigan already has 2 running backs in Cole Cabana and Benjamin Hall. I think Cabana is one of the most dangerous offensive weapons in the entire country, but I think he'll play multiple roles for Michigan. I think he'll be a slot guy. I think he'll be a guy that also returns kicks and punts. So I'm not sure Cabana I would classify Cabana as a true running back. And then when you look at Benjamin Hall, he's struggled as a senior. He's been up and down. So I think Taylor is a guy that could be a very serviceable option, considering that Cabana will likely be a jack of all trades and that Hall hasn't been what was expected of him. But Taylor, I really liked in the offseason. I thought he had a strong performance when I saw him live at Sound Mind, Sound Body's Ford Field Showcase. I named him a top performer at a Pylon 7-on-7 tournament. So I've seen him in the past. He doesn't have amazing track times, but he's game fast. I think there's 2 different profiles for Darius Taylor. I think the height weight is inaccurate here. I think he's closer to 5'9.5", 185 or so. He is a little bit of a smaller kid, but I do think that He has had a great senior season. Western no longer in the playoffs, but he had a great senior season. He was very productive. 11.3, I believe, was his personal best 100-meter, which isn't slow at all. I do feel like he has, again, good gain speed. He's a good receiver out of the backfield, even though he didn't post a ton of receiving yards. Seeing him in 7-on-7 in these offseason camps, I thought he looked really good as a pass catcher. But again, I think he's a serviceable option. I think he's also a guy you can move around, offers you a little bit of flexibility within the offense. So Taylor's definitely want to keep an eye on. Again, he visited Michigan, so could be a flip from the Gophers if the Wolverines push. And Michigan in for a couple of Wisconsin defensive line commits, Trey Pierce, Jamel Howard. Michigan pushing to get both in for OVs. Pierce made an unofficial visit, so I think they can flip both from Wisconsin, especially with Wisconsin not having a head coach right now. And then Cameron Calhoun, three-star cornerback out of Ohio, is committed to the hometown Cincinnati Bearcats, but I feel like Michigan can get him on campus and potentially create a flip there. Steve Klinkscale has strong ties throughout the state of Ohio, visited Calhoun during the bye week. So Calhoun's definitely an interesting kid. I saw him at the Under Armour camp in Ohio, and I actually wrote that he should be a guy that Michigan should consider offering. He hasn't blown up quite like I expected him to, but obviously he is a late Michigan offer. I think Calhoun is pretty technically sound. I think he plays with a high football IQ as well. He's not super explosive or athletic, but again, he's so technically sound. I think he would fit in well at a place like Michigan. He's listed at 5'8", 11 and a half. I would give him 6 feet. So he does have decent height, decent length. Again, good technique. I think the concerns with Calhoun have been more in the speed and explosion aspect, but he's definitely would definitely be a solid flip from Cincinnati. Let's go down to Haven Harris, who asks EJ, any chance we round back to Oklahoma recruits? Seems like they have some Midwest feel. Potentially, I mean, they have revisited some Oklahoma commits. They saw Logan Howland during the bye week. Howland being offensive line commit, but I've been told that there is just not a lot of movement there. They've revisited Jacoby Johnson, who made an official visit to Michigan in the summer. Was once rated as the number one athlete in the country, but not a ton of movement there either. I would still keep an eye on Jacoby. He has kind of that Michigan kid feel, but just not a lot of movement with Oklahoma uh, com- commits right now. Let's go down to Theodore Frazier. He says, so let's say that the 2023 class is a wash. How do you think our 2024 class will shake out with the recruits we're in on? And do you think we can finish top 10? Yeah, I mean, I would have extremely high expectations for 2024. Michigan's going to be coming off, another strong season, maybe a college football playoff berth, maybe a Big Ten title, maybe a national championship appearance. I mean, the sky's the limit with this team this season. Either way, it will be a strong year for another strong year for the Wolverines, which proves that last year wasn't really a flash in the pan. So I think having a couple of years of success will definitely help on the recruiting trail. And more importantly, if Michigan is able to lock in Jaden Davis early, who is expected to make a decision before the end of the calendar year, you have a leader of the class, which, Michigan hasn't had a quarterback leading the class in a while, not since JJ. I mean, you had back-to-back classes where there you have project quarterbacks. You had Jaden Denegal and Alex Orji, and Orji was a really late addition. And then this cycle, you have Kendrick Bell, who's more of an athlete that may get a shot at playing quarterback. So yeah, you haven't had that early, big time quarterback commit like you did with JJ, and JJ played a huge role in helping put together the 2021 recruiting class. I think Jaden Davis could potentially have a similar effect with the 2024 recruiting class. But the two things that concern me about getting too hyped up because I personally got too hyped up after Michigan made the playoff last year. I was like, man, Michigan's going to finish, top 5 this recruiting class. They're going to land all types of big time dudes. They historically recruit well. Now they have this playoff under them, and obviously it turned into, I wouldn't call the 23 class a disaster, but it certainly hasn't met expectations. But the two things that concern me with getting that hyped up for 2024 are, one, offseason drama. It seems like Michigan is its own worst enemy. There hasn't been a year that I've been on the Michigan beat where we've just had a smooth sailing offseason. So, you're already seeing the Harbaugh rumors start up with the Indianapolis Colts on social media. Obviously, I don't think there's anything to those rumors, and there's no real reason to talk about the NFL stuff right now. But will those rumors get on social media in even more mass once the offseason hits? It's bound to happen since Harbaugh is such a polarizing figure. How much staff movement will there be? Who knows? There was a ton last year. I think, Jesse Minter is here to stay. I think the co-offensive coordinators of Sharon Moore and Matt Weiss are good to go, but you just never know. You never know what's going to happen with certain assistants. You never know who's going to get job offers. You never know who's going to want to take a move up to the NFL, or things of that nature. So you're going to have, you might have, some staff movement. It'll be interesting to see how chaotic that staff movement is. Last year's staff movement was a killer on the recruiting trail, just because you had the Jim Harbaugh NFL saga last forever. And then you had both coordinators leave. Then you had guys switching positions, like Bellamy moving from safeties to wide receivers. And then you had, completely new guys coming in like Mike Elston. So there was just a ton of chaos with the coaching staff. I don't think there will be as much chaos, if any, with the coaching staff next offseason. But again, Michigan has been its own worst enemy every offseason. So if they can avoid offseason drama, that would be great. Aside from that, NIL is still a concern. Schools like Michigan State, Miami, Oregon, Texas A&M, they're doing things different than Michigan. I'm not saying Michigan should take the same approach, but how is Michigan going to adapt to lose battles to some of those schools and not being able to pitch a ton on the NIL front? What will Michigan do from a recruiting perspective, not just a team perspective, which I think they have great plans for the team. I think Valiant does a great job of getting these guys opportunities, but from a recruiting gray area perspective, how much into the gray are you willing to go? How are you willing to adapt when, recruit X comes to visit Michigan and asks about NIL? What can you do outside of just presenting the deals that players have now and what's in the works? So I think there's still a lot to answer with NIL. I think having Santa Ono as president will help in some regard, but it's more so just wait and see, right? I think me, even as just a recruiting reporter, just like you guys, I'm tired of hearing, "Oh, here's big announcement coming," and then we don't get jack. So I'm waiting to see when these announcements actually come into fruition and when it actually makes a difference in recruiting. I think there can be a happy medium where you're not Oregon, but you're also just not getting left completely behind. So I think in order for Michigan to truly finish top 10, top 5, I think top 10 is a possibility even with NIL struggles. But I think for Michigan to get into that top 5, to really reach its potential and capitalize off of playoff momentum, I think they need to figure out NIL. Let's go ahead and see. Luke is next up in line. He says, with LSU turning their season around, do you still believe there's a chance he flips to Michigan down the road? I'm not sure who Luke is referring to. Oh, it looks like he is referring to Jalen Brown. Um, I think Michigan was hopeful that he would come in for one of the big games in October, but obviously that did not happen. So I would say chances are pretty low with 5-star wide receiver Jalen Brown, who is currently committed to LSU. All right, let's go ahead and go down to the next question. Actually, before we move on to the next question, guys, we do have only about 6 minutes or so left. Remember, like I mentioned at the top of the show, and if you were not here, I have a Zoom meeting that I need to get to after this show. So if you want your question to guaranteed be answered, leave a super chat. That money actually goes directly to my travel budget. So it's not going to corporate on three or anything. It's going directly, well, not directly to my bank account, but it's going directly to my travel budget so I can go and watch guys across the country like I do every week. So super chats are very appreciated, and it'll vault you to the front of the line, especially when we are on time constraints like we are this week. Let's go ahead and go on to the next person in line. Envy Universe 7. EJ, I'm just going to drop my questions right now. Who do you think Michigan is in the best spot in out of the 24 and 2025 guys, like the top couple of guys? So for 2024, I would immediately throw out Jaden Davis. Obviously, he is Michigan's top overall target in 2024. Top 100 quarterback across the board from Charlotte Providence Day. I had a great story with Jaden that just ran over at the Wolverine.com. He talked about his recent visit to Michigan, his special relationship with JJ McCarthy, Michigan's offense, all that great stuff. And again, Davis is expected to make a decision before the end of the year. So I think Michigan is the clubhouse leader here. I have a prediction in, have had one in since the summer. I know a few have come in from different networks and all that good stuff. I've had you on lock since the summer, and I haven't felt more confident in my prediction than I do today. So I love where the Wolverines stand with Davis. And like I mentioned earlier, Davis is definitely going to be a peer recruiter. I think he can help build up the class. A guy that I could see joining him is teammate Jaden Goodwin, 3-star wide receiver, also out of Providence Day. Pretty underrated, a legacy recruit. His father, Jonathan, was a Michigan great who went on to win a Super Bowl in the NFL. So Channing Goodwin, I think, is a guy that is leaning Michigan early on for sure. So I think you could see him come on board. And I think Michigan's in a really good spot with another one of Davis's teammates, Jordan Shipp, another 3-star wide receiver who I think should be a 4. I think those guys could potentially turn not necessarily into a package deal, but I think it could turn into a domino type of situation in 2024. And Michigan already has 2 commits: Manuel Beagle, who's more of an upside European take, and then Mason Curtis, an on 300 linebacker who I had a chance to see live last month and is just really impressive from an athletic standpoint. Can play multiple positions. Excited to see how he kind of fills out and projects. And then in 2025, it's still really early, but I think that, since Michigan has now gone back to back cycles without taking true quarterbacks, even if the Wolverines land Jaden Davis, I think they're still going all in for an elite quarterback in 2025 as well. So they're in a good spot with a handful of 2025 quarterbacks. Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback nationally, is actually right in the state of Michigan. At Belleville, he led Belleville to a state title as a 14-year-old. He's visited Michigan on multiple occasions this fall. The Wolverines actually lead on the recruiting prediction machine. I do think Underwood is going to attract the attention of several powers down south. I do think he's open to those schools, but I also feel like Michigan's doing a good job with him early on. Like I said, he's visited multiple times this fall. He was also on campus in the offseason. I know there's been some issues at Belleville in the past, which is another story for another day, but I do feel like the Wolverines are strongly in the mix for Underwood, as well as a couple of other top 100 2025 quarterbacks. Ryan Montgomery out of Ohio has visited multiple times. Cutter Boley out of Kentucky has visited multiple times. So they are very much getting a head start on the elite quarterbacks in 2025. Let's go ahead and go down to Kevin. Do you think having an on-field coach, Mike Elston, as the recruiting coordinator is hurting recruiting. I think recruiting coordinator was more of a title they gave to Elston, though he does help out recruiting with multiple positions and he's very active in terms of the coaching staff's recruiting approach, but he's not the recruiting coordinator like in terms of Courtney Morgan. It's not like they were like, hey, Elston, on top of being the defensive line coach, which is an important position, here's all these responsibilities that Courtney Morgan had, and now you have them. I don't think that's what happened. Elston is more of the recruiting coordinator for the coaching staff and making sure, guys are on point in different areas and things of that nature. But I think, when it comes to the recruiting department, there still needs to be some additions. Obviously, Michigan hired Albert Karshnia this offseason, who I think is more of a grunt worker who really spends a lot of time evaluating underclassmen and planning things. I think the recruiting department has, great on-campus recruiting coordinator. Christina DeRuiter does a tremendous job on visits, but I still think they need a Courtney Morgan type, kind of that big personality, relationship builder within the recruiting department, kind of an extra coach in office that's involved on some of these Zoom calls. That's really getting in with some of the high school coaches and 7-on-7 coaches and trainers and all that stuff. That's what Courtney was really good at. I don't necessarily think that's the strong suit for Karshnia, but I do feel like Harbaugh recognizes the need for a better recruiting department. That's why he's worked to revamp it over the last couple of years. Obviously, it wasn't expected that Courtney was going to leave so fast. So I think you probably will see more movement within the recruiting department next year. All right, guys, we got about 2 minutes left. So if you have a question that you want answered and you were not here earlier in this show, make sure to chime in with a super chat. You'll get vaulted to the top of the list. And like I said, that money goes straight to my travel budget. As always, before we get out of here, subscribe to the Wolverine.com, just $10 until next football season. But let's go ahead and answer a few more questions before we get out of here. What international prospects is Michigan recruiting in 2024, says Leo Jerstein. So Michigan has obviously looked at several international prospects over the last year with Mike Elston on staff. He has a great relationship with Brandon Collier, who is the king of European recruiting, does a great job of mining for prospects and helping them get exposure out in Europe. So it's great for Elston to have that connection. So in 24, they already have one commitment in Manuel Beagle, who is a defensive lineman out of Germany, has been playing offensive line for prep school in Connecticut this year. So he's already one on board. And then German linebacker Justin Okoronkwo is another that Michigan offered in the summer after he camped with the Wolverines. He's definitely one to monitor moving forward. Let's go ahead and go down to Michigan Wolverine. He asked if Michigan gets Davis, would the 2025 quarterback Bryce Underwood not be interested in Michigan? I do not think so. I think knowing Bryce, I don't think Bryce really knows a ton about Jaden Davis, nor do I think Bryce really cares. I mean, Bryce has a lot of confidence about himself, which I really like. I think Bryce thinks he's the number one player in the country regardless. So I don't think Bryce is going to be scared off by Jaden Davis or anybody else for that matter. Honestly, if like Arch Manning was coming to Michigan, I don't think Bryce would really care. So I think Bryce is very, very confident in himself. Let's go ahead and go down to our last question of the day, and it is we'll do two more. It looks like there was a ton of questions. So guys, if you want your questions answered, now is the time. We got like a minute left. So we'll go rapid fire on like three more. EJ, have you seen the new running back offer, Darius Taylor? What happened to Jeremiah Love? Yes, we talked about Darius Taylor earlier in the show. Make sure to watch the replay of this show. I think Michigan has a great shot to flip him from Minnesota if they pushed. As far as Jeremiah Love, Michigan recruited him more as a corner. He wanted to play running back, and things didn't really shake after his OV. YouTube user asked EJ, are we recruiting any Mississippi guys? We have some dogs down here. Appreciate your work. Oh, yeah, man. I'm all about Mississippi guys. I'm from Texas. So, I covered quite a few Mississippi guys when I was on the Texas beat. But as far as the Michigan beat, they don't recruit Mississippi very often. There aren't a lot of guys there. Luke Hamilton. John Stacy. Luke Hamilton from Ohio. Also, the edge is escaping me. Both 4 stars in 2024. Yes, Luke Hamilton and Brian Robinson, Michigan, in a great spot with both prospects. Both prospects have visited this fall. I actually have on 3 predictions in for both. All right, guys. It looks like you guys failed with the super chats, which is disappointing. Y'all are going to have to come back with them next week. But appreciate you all for joining me. As always, subscribe to the Wolverine.com. Just $10 until next football season. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the Wolverine YouTube channel as well. That's completely free. It helps the algorithm. It helps us get out there and get our brand out and get people over to join the chat so you guys can interact with me and your fellow Michigan fans. Like I said, guys, have a great night and looking forward to seeing y'all again next week.